Good day, everyone. Good day, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Good day, Mr. Gabriel. Welcome to our class today. Good day, sir. I want to welcome all our mentees. Thank you for joining very early on. Thank you for being here. We'll be starting right about now. And before anything, I would like to reintroduce myself. I am Dennis Williams. I'll be your moderator for today. Thank everyone. I want to say thank you to everyone for joining early on, and we'll be starting up right about now. So we'll be going straight into the announcements for today. And for the announcements, we are still on the based on the mentorship registration. Officially, registration has closed for this quarter, but it's opened for next quarter. So for those who weren't able to register for this quarter, like you had people who were interested, but maybe because of financial constraints and you were not able to register, the portal is open to kickstart early the registration for next quarter. So you can begin to make arrangements for all of that. And in case if you want to, after this course you're taking in AI, you want to go into another field, or you want to explore into another direction, we also give you that opportunity so you can start with the registration process. Our courses available are still intellectual property, artificial intelligence and technology, the energy industry, fintech industry, health tech and law, patents drafting, blockchain, NFT and metaverse, data privacy and protection, entertainment, business and law, and patent drafting. So those are our courses. Friends and family, like I said, who are still interested in our program, they can still register. So on to our next announcements, 30 minutes one-on-one mentorship section. The registration for that is still on. If you are interested in a 30 minutes one-on-one private mentorship, you can reach out to us and we'll guide you on how to go about it. What you will get from that section is you will get hacks, secrets, life lessons, and directions from your favorite mentor. So moving on, I would like us to just go straight into the introduction of our mentor. Today we have our first mentor. Our first mentor is Professor Francesco Lapenta. Francesco Lapenta is Francesco Lapenta is the founding director of the John Cabot University Institute of Future and Innovation Studies. Currently, he is also a Mozilla Ford Research Fellow and the technical editor of the LEEE P7006 standard on personal data artificial intelligence agents. His research focused on emerging technologies, innovation technologies, governing technologies, governance and standardization process, ethics and impact assessment, and future scenario analysis. He holds a PhD in sociology from the University of London, joint supervision, Goldsmiths College, and the London School of Economics. The PhD was awarded a research grant by the ESRC, Economic and Social Research Council, UK. He has worked as associate professor in new media studies and business innovation at the Department of Communication, Business and Information Technology at RUC University, Denmark, from 2009 to 2019. An assistant professor, 2007-2009, visiting professor at New York University, 2011-2012, and John Cabot University, 2019. He has organized many international conferences in the United States, Latin America, and Europe, and participated in organized countless academic and public events worldwide. worldwide, influencing the debates on emergency technology. He has for years served on the executive board of the IVSA Association. His latest work includes the influential book Research Methods in Service Innovation. F. Francesco Lapenta and F. Sarens Elgar 2017, in which he explores the use of future-oriented scenario analysis for technology and innovation research. The 2016 book Data Ethics, The New Competitive Advantage by G. Hasselberg and P. Transberg, editor by F. Lapenta, publisher, was one of the first books to describe the concept and established privacy and the right to control one's own data as key positive legal and business parameters. In 2011, he published Locative Media and the Digital Visualization of space, place, and information. Lapenta, Edie, Taylor, and Francis. Professor Lapenta has been teaching courses and seminars in business and information technology, digital rights and media ethics, new media studies, advanced media-based research method, ethics and impact assessment on emerging technology. He has supervised countless student industry collaborative projects as a part of his master's course. We will thank you, Professor Francesco Lapenta, for being here with us and being one of our mentors. Our second mentor for today is Ms. Favor Borokini. Favor Borokini is a technology policy researcher with a law background in Nigeria. In her role as data and digital rights researcher with policy, a Ugandan civil technology not-for-profit, she researches a number of naughty topics related to technology, facilitated violence against women, and the general impacts on subsisting and emerging technology on social justice and equality. She also works as a content writer with Ethic Intelligence and AI Ethic consulting firm and various research groups on topics related to data protection, regulation, healthcare delivery, and is currently an affiliate with the Future Society. Ms. Favor Burundi is our second mentor for today. And last but not least, on our list of mentors is Mr. Gabriel Udo. Gabriel Udo is a research fellow and doctoral candidate at the Faculty of Law, Europa University, Varina, Frankfurt, Germany, and recently won the Deutsche Acadencia. This last name is kind of hard to pronounce. 400 position under the VIP Fellowship Program for the research project, Intelligence, Weaponry, Law, and Ethics. His research specialties are centered mostly on artificial intelligence and law weapon technology, smart city technology, and international humanitarian law, robotics, autonomous. Currently, Gabriel is a Beyond Fellow in Ethics Group on the Observation International AI Future Lab on Artificial Intelligence for Technische Universität Munich. He holds a master's degree in international law, several and machine learning, Python certification in artificial intelligence programming for data analysis, UAVs, and small robotics. He has several publications in both local and international journals. Gabriel having presented papers in India, Sweden, Austria, and others in these research areas. At leisure, Gabriel plays the piano, chess, develops programs with Python, and listens to music. That is our last mentor for today, Mr. Gabriel. We would like to thank our mentors for being here with us. I can see Mr. Francesco Lapenta is already on call with us. We would like for him to go first and give us his section on our topic for today, bias in AI and its human rights implication. So Mr. Francesco, sir, the floor is yours. You can come and have your section, sir.
Hi, so can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
But can you see me?
No, okay, no, not yet, sir.
I don't know how to solve it. I restarted my computer. There's something with the Zoom app. I can't show the video. I don't want to waste time. I tried already several times. But you can hear me clearly?
Yes, you are very audible, sir.
Okay, that's good. So thank you, Dennis. Okay, I have just a question before I start. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. How much time do I have?
You have about 20 minutes, sir.
20 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Let's make it 30. Our second mentor won't be around for today, so we only have Mr. Gabriel and Prof.
Around 30 minutes.
Yes, 30 minutes.
All right, thank you. So for 40, good. I have to compress a lot of information, no? So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me again. As some of you probably know, I support very much your program, and I'm thankful, first of all, for Juliana to have invited me. Now I think it's almost 2 years ago, the first time we got in touch. And as you might know, I've been now regularly supporting this project, which I think it's invaluable. And so I'm very glad and thankful to be part of it. And I think it's grown incredibly, and I commend the commitment to this beautiful project. So today I want to address the issue of AI bias, but you have to allow me to do it in a bit of a different way, because you're clearly immersed into it. But what I'd like to give is a very, very short historical overview of what we might call technological bias in general, and how this is been going on for basically decades, becoming increasingly more consequential, and probably is going to reach another level of consequentiality with the development of AI that is currently happening. But one of the key tenets of my method, the way I approach what I do, which is future studies, is that basically future studies is not so much as guessing what the future might look like. I would say it's a rather more boring logic approach to history, and it's based on the fundamental fact that when you look at the future, although the future might seem open, in reality it's not arbitrary. It's a result of a complex series of decisions, actors, events that have begun in the past, have reached a certain configuration in the present, and will evolve in the future. So it's like a curve that started many decades ago and has been developing through different actors and forces and habits, and is reached a certain development today. But it's actually easier than you can imagine to push the boundaries of what the future might look like, especially if you think about the close future, 5 or 10 years. And it gets a little bit more complicated when you push towards the 20 years. When thinking about bias, it's really important to understand where we stand and where we're coming from. So I want to limit myself to a brief overview, starting from the basically the First and Second World War. So if you look at, for example, in the 30s, no, between the two wars, you will see that historically, despite the first two industrial revolutions, the world was economically in a really bad place. There was the Great Depression in the States. There was immense poverty in the States. The same was true for the UK, one of the countries where the Industrial Revolution really started. And the same could be said for all over Europe. So in the 30s, one author that you probably are familiar with, Keynes, optimistically predicted that technological advances and increased productivity would eventually end poverty and lead to economic growth and improved well-being for future generations in industrialized countries that use technology to increase productivity. Now, what he didn't foresee is that this technological advancement was mostly derived from the Second World War, where many of his ideals actually became a reality because increasing government control and spending and investment in public infrastructures, housing, manufacturing, mobility, education, research, innovation, and the growing open market were really supporting and also strengthened international laws and financial institutions, where the key elements of a formula where government's investment was designed to create innovation based on technological innovation for the betterment of the conditions of the citizens. And this happened in a very specific model. So there was an energy dependence. It was based on the ability to have energy. Permanent technological innovation cycles. So the competition for technological innovation really started with the Second World War, and probably, I don't know how many of you might have seen the movie Oppenheimer about the atomic bomb and the race there was for the atomic bomb. And that created really a model, a competition between geopolitical forces to be the first to develop the most innovative technologies. And then there were some key paradigms. One was increased efficiency, the other one was increased productivity, and another one was the increased centralization of innovation cycles in dominant tech hubs. And this is really important to keep in mind. So what happened is that you basically had a specific way of investing in technology. The idea of technology as a competitive advantage because of the lesson learned during the war, where basically technology, the Second World War specifically, technology played a key role. But during the Second World War, also a model became very consolidated, where there was a specific connection between education in universities and the military industrial complex, and innovation and technological innovations in general. But also what emerged more importantly was this winner takes all mentality. So the idea was that we were in a constant competition, and investments, but also the ability to elicit technological innovation became a dominant paradigm that has never left us. So since the end of the Second World War, we have been in this technological race. Now, what is interesting about what happened is that there was a self-reinforcing cycle of innovation and capital concentration that gave technologically developed nations and dominant economies and companies a compounding advantage compared to other societies, because the technological baselines that they were able to create became the baselines for further innovation. So what happened after the Second World War is that you have an increasing division and an increasing evolution that has been unprecedented in the history of humanity. You start to have a very small percentage of humanity that, because of technology, is much better at exploiting human resources and natural resources, and you have growing inequality among nations and within nations, because you have nations that, because of these innovation cycles and the development of technology, are basically increasingly lagging behind. So the combination of technological innovation and financial investments and regulation of innovation processes, especially in the form of standardization and the IPs, they kept giving a permanent geopolitical competition and advantage in technological leadership to very specific societies. Now, what is interesting when you look at this period, it's there's some elements that you need to be aware. So if for example, we start from 1900, right, just a little bit over 100 years ago. If you look on the planet in 1900, there were basically less than 1 billion people. There were around 600 million people. So in 1900, I think exactly at the turn of the 1900, on the planet Earth, there were only maximum 600 million people. Then what happened within 150 years, 120 years is unprecedented. It's really, really unprecedented. If you look, for example, in the period between, let's say, 4,000 years before 1900, 4,000 years, you will have a very small increase in humans on the planet. We will go from something like 70 millions to around 500 millions in 4,000 years. In less than 100 years, we went from 600 million to 8 billion people on the planet, going for 10 billion people by the end of 1950, the prediction is. So what happened is unprecedented in the history of humanity. More and more people were on the planet, more and more resources were needed, more and more competition for these resources has been evolved in a short, incredibly short time span. I mean, 70 years is literally nothing in the history of humanity. And all of this was driven by technological innovation and scientific research and innovation in agriculture and innovation in medicine and innovation in building cities. Now, this is very important for me also to point out, is that what really happened is that within these few decades, an enormous phenomenon, two enormous phenomena happened, three actually at the same time. So you have technological innovation on one side, the demographic boom on the other side, and an incredible process of urbanization. So within 70 years, you will have ginormous percentage of this population that moved from rural areas to cities. And the cities acquired an incredibly pivotal function, because not only the cities became the social economic labs of innovation, it's the place where all the most advanced technologies were kind of used for the first time. In a compounding effect, some cities became hubs of technological innovation in a very complex relation between technological innovations itself, but also legal innovation and stronger protection of IP rights and copyrights laws, and a much more complex system for IPs, basically. So a compound effect happened in these hubs, tech hubs, urban tech hubs. You will have incredibly high educated people that were really the 1% of the most talented people in very specific areas of technological innovation, but also in finance, economy, and law. And they were all concentrated in very specific urban centers. Now, what is really important about this? This is really important to understand, is that basically you started to have some innovation echo chambers with high barriers to wider participation. There were characterized by increasingly more complex administrative aspects, including patent claims, intellectual property protection, but also the ability to secure financing and safeguarding innovation. They all started to have increasing centralization tendencies. The innovation process for technology really in the past 18 years have been concentrated in 5 key tech hubs. And then big urban areas started to become the labs for these technological advancements, and also the early adopters of all these innovations. If you think about metropolitan systems, housing, healthcare, education, and whatnot, you will see the fundamental function that specific cities have been playing in this process. Now, what's interesting is that if you look in the G7 countries today, since the 1900s to today, you will see that in the G7 countries, almost 80% of the population, 80% of the population live in big cities. But if you look globally, you will see that only 15% of people live in big cities. And actually more than 50% live in rural areas. So you have a ginormous diversification, because you will have people in rural areas that are totally cut off from these innovation models, or they always come very late. And you know, for example, that 1 billion people have still no electricity. So what happened is that you start to have this historically unprecedented demographic growth, but also economic gap that has been only increasing ever since. But what is important about the city specifically is the cultural connotations. So what you started to see was the centralization of innovation. So very small cities became the hubs for technologies that then would be adopted worldwide, but in a top-down process, because basically all technological innovations were developed in specific areas and then trickling down, adopted around the world, increasingly less so as you moved into rural areas. So this created a ginormous gap in consumption of resources, because you have a small percentage of humanity that is consuming most resources to the advantage of the few. But you started to have also an embedded process of cultural connotation of technology, because, for example, whenever you read on a technological device that is designed in a country X and assembled in a country Y, it highlights the cultural origin of the design. So the impact of the original designer's cultural context and values have grown incredibly, exponentially more important, especially with digital platforms that are increasingly more and more developed in specific cities and then adopted worldwide. And what you have a reflection of the cultural influence on these digital technologies and platforms that are designed in one cultural sphere and designed for a specific community by a specific community. So everybody in the Silicon Valley, for example, which has a very specific culture, the people participating and living there, they also belong to a very specific community, and they're developing these technologies that are mostly designed with a very clear cultural bias. And this cultural bias is so clear and is so self-aware that you have increasingly seen devices that are designed in country, designed in California and assembled in China, for example. So they're clearly stating this cultural dominance. Now, this is really important to understand, because this impact that was important for analog technologies is become exponentially more important with digital technologies and digital platforms that are designed with cultural biases. And they're gonna become ever more important with the development of AI systems. AI systems and applications are incredibly grounded in culturally significant kind of connotations. So you have a cultural bias that will increase and pose an increasing risk and challenges to diversity. Now, how do you alter this model? Because this model has been consolidated. This model has been at the basis of all technological innovations for the past 100 years and more. I'm not even going to look back at the first and second industrial revolutions, only if we limit ourselves to everything that happened after the Second World War. Now, what you start to have is the increasingly awareness that we need a different cultural approach to innovation, that we need a different cultural approach to sustainability, that we need a different cultural approach to technological innovation per se, and specifically AI development, which is going to be certainly one of the biggest drivers in the next, I would say, 4 decades will be characterized by development of AI, and then we will get into the field of biotech and everything in between. So the next 4 decades are fundamental. So how do you change this? Well, first of all, you need to change this top-down model. So we need to be able to change the fact that specific tech hubs are the ones responsible for all key technological innovations. And this is going to be incredibly complex because basically, as I tried to tell you, it's a system that it reinforces itself. You have the winners take all strategy. So what you have is people that is investing in innovation will go to the most important emerging technology, which is always the most complex and is the one that can be adopted only by a minority, because the technological baseline required to use advanced technological systems is normally present only in these specific minority areas, in urban areas, for example. And then you will have also this complexity of governance of the innovation system with copyright law and IP protection and whatnot that becomes more and more complex. So the only way we can invert this is if we start to create a system that moves from centralization to decentralization of innovation. And this is where it becomes really interesting for artificial intelligence, because one of the main areas and opportunities of artificial intelligence is that of being more decentralized. Because if you look at all analog technologies, they are incredibly expensive. If you think about infrastructures, if you think about schools, if you think about transportation, if you think about energy production, those are all technological dimensions that require a huge economic investment. But in reality, what is happening with the digital and specifically with AI, that you have an unusual affordability of the technology. Because the technological baseline to use advanced AI application is becoming lower and lower. It's enough to have a smartphone today to have access to many of these AI applications that you're all familiar with. And this creates an incredible opportunity if developed in the right way. Now, naturally, AI systems are designed by specific small communities, and more importantly, are based on very limited data. And this data on which the AI trained are incredibly biased. They are representing mostly data that have been collected in these very urban areas, which are the biggest producers of data. They represent specific forms of data, like scientific data, for example, which has, again, have been generated in very small areas. But the affordability, or the fact that you can access AI in a way that was unprecedented for other analog technologies, where the economic investment of a nation is ginormous, offers an opportunity. And regulation will be able to help diversification, trying to counter this cultural bias that will naturally be present in all AI applications. And one way of doing it is to basically force platforms that are developing new AI systems to be able to be developed with independent data. Now, the opportunity of AI is that it can be decentralized, because you can have AI data trained on specific scientific data, which are general and true for all societies. But they can also be trained on data that are context and cultural specific. Now, the problem of innovation is that the top-down model, which is only serving one minority, is being designed to be used by that minority that is consuming all natural resources in a way. But the affordance of AI is the ability to be developed with alternative data models, with alternative data, and to be contextualized in different cultural spheres and cultural communities that have different needs. Because one of the tenets of the innovation as we know it is that there's almost a belief that all societies need the same technology. But in reality, we know that every culture, every area has different problems. And these different problems, of course, you can find technological solutions on the open market that might be relevant to that problem. But in reality, the real potential is for local communities to develop solutions which are relevant both culturally, but also within the affordances and limitation of the specific context. Every area has things that are more accessible, that perhaps are not even accessible globally, but also they have specific cultural dimensions which need to be kind of included in the solutions. So one of the positive aspects of the development of artificial intelligence is that it can be trained on many different sets of data. So one of the things that we should be able to push is for the ability to use specific domains, like JIIPCC Q4, for example, and to use specific data sets that are culturally local and relevant to specific community in a way they can be AI system can be trained on local cultural sensitivities, but also local problems, and also help in comparing specific cultural sensitivities and needs with more general trends. Now, for me, diversity is an asset in innovation. So if we can use AI to counter the cultural bias that has been present in technological innovation for the 80 years, it would be to the advantage of sustainability. It would be to the advantage of innovation processes. It would be to the advantage of being able to create a sustainable model in which all societies can develop and improve their conditions based on local affordances on what is available in the area, but also to compete globally, because through the help of AI, for example, you could compete with the incredibly complex systems that are necessary to protect innovation at the legal level. Because as you know very well, it's very easy probably to invent something that is totally innovative and is not based on existing technologies, but is very difficult to get someone to support economically these innovations so that they are then become marketably viable and they can be produced on a scale sufficient to solve problems for a specific community. Also, money rarely goes in that direction. But also another problem that is fundamental is education. Education is tailored for specific communities and is very often not available or not accessible to many people. And the AI can constitute a great opportunity to diversify the education models, to make education more accessible, more tailored to the specific communities and cultures. So in a way, there's a great opportunities that artificial intelligence can be leveraged for, but in reality is most unlikely. The most likely scenario, especially given the contemporary geopolitics, will be that of strengthening this cultural dominance in the development of AI, and with a much bigger increase in the socio-economic gap. And the socio-economic gap I'm talking about is both between nations, but more importantly, also within nations, because now you have a trend within developing countries or more industrialized countries in which a minority is becoming vastly more wealthy than the greatest majority. So although the problem is, as I said, culturally different, in reality, there's many ways in which this gap is being shaped in the past few years, and AI, in my way, has all the opportunity to increase this gap. It's most likely to increase this gap unless we do something about it, and it requires a ginormous collective effort to try to derail this innovation process that has been top-down, centralized in few countries and few cities, to something that is decentralized, in which basically everybody can use AI to develop local solutions. This needs a global legislation, needs global regulation for the innovation processes. It needs a push for standards that are open, standards in AI that are accessible to all, and it requires specific legal boundaries for the use of data and how they can be used to the advantage of different communities, both to counter these biases in the development of dominant AIs, but also to offer the opportunity to create diversity by training with data that are culturally relevant. All right, thank you. I have to stop, I think.
Thank you very much, Professor Francesco Lapenta, for taking us through that wonderful step-by-step detailed progression on the developments of AI bias from the Industrial Revolution down to current modern day. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to see our mentees show their reactions, show their appreciation for that wonderful section from Professor Francesco Lapenta. Thank you very much, sir, for that wonderful and very educating section. We would like to have our second mentor, Mr. Gabriel Udo. We would like to have you come join us and also share your thoughts and contribution on this very interesting topic, AI bias and its human rights implication.
Okay, thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you so much, Professor Lapenta. Again, as like the first time we met here, that was very, very enlightening as always. There was a lot of information. As a matter of fact, I had to make another set of slides because most of the information that was in my the presentation I wanted to make today was had been sorted out by the discussion Prof just had. So I quickly thought of another dimension. I decided to look at some other dimensions. But just before I go into what I'm going to discuss, let me just quickly add the importance of looking at one of the major issues that Prof has mentioned, the issue of bias and the fact that AI most times represents the ideologies. Sometimes I use the word the idiosyncrasies of the society where it is being made. And I've said this several times, even before today, that the major problem that Africa, generally the global South, or smaller communities that import AI, what's going to happen? It's going to affect the sociocultural fiber of our societies. Many a times, because the technologies are built, sometimes there are regulations to control how AI is being applied, how it's being used. For instance, within the EU now, there's the AI Act, the proposed AI Act at the moment, that has limited the use of certain technologies, reduced the impact of AI in certain aspects of society. You find out there are some technologies that cannot operate in some places because of legislations, also because the sociocultural makeup of that society does not permit such technologies. But whether in the absence of legislations or regulations, generally in the absence of proper structures, then we are going to adopt technologies in such a manner that it's likely to affect the social fiber, the cultural structure of our society. Having said that, I will go into, let me see, I have so many. Okay, I think I'll just open this. Okay, oh, I got it. Okay, I'm trying to share my screen. I hope I get the right one. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir. Your screen is it's
Okay. All right. All right. So Prof has talked a lot about the issue of how AI bias generally and the impact, has even given a historical breakdown of how this came about. And like I mentioned, there are so many things that he mentioned in his presentation that would reduce the size of what I have to give. I don't like to repeat what has been said before, or what I have seen in most of the presentations. But I wanted to look at the dimension of discrimination in itself, and how AI bias is going to impact that right against discrimination. So first of all here, and of course the primary law I use, at first I thought of using the Nigerian Constitution because most of us I think are Nigerians, but I'm sure if we get the general perspective of discrimination and bias in itself, then we can apply it in our own independent studies, and it would be a lot easier when we understand the global dimension to it. I mentioned here that artificial intelligence, of course, poses significant challenge to the right against discrimination. It's one of the biggest problems of artificial intelligence, specifically the bias problem, which comes with, it's more like a mother to so many other problems that come with AI. Okay, so again, generally, like I said, I'm just going to make this very brief. I'm going to do a short summary of everything, and then if there are areas that have not been covered, then I'll take them during the question time. So most of the items that we have here are just a very brief summary of some very lengthy discussion that I probably not sure we would have all the time to go into. We've talked about AI bias generally, but what does bias mean? Of course, what does bias mean in AI? Here I said AI bias refers to unfair outcomes and discrimination that occurs when systems are designed and implemented. So there's usually the question as to, of course, most philosophers will try to find the difference between or the source of the bias in AI technologies generally. So where is the bias coming from? If you say a machine cannot think, it does not have some independence to an extent, how can it be biased in its decision making? And here comes the foundational concept is that machine learning models, which are of course mostly used in training AI, they are not themselves, they are not objective. They don't think, they don't take decisions on their own. They are being trained by engineers, and now they are being trained by sets of data. So that human involvement transfers the human perspective. Whether we like it or not, as far as we're all concerned as humans, we have this implicit level of biases. It's how you let it to affect your interaction with others that becomes questionable. But generally, we all have biases. There are people that can buy some kind of food and cannot buy this kind of food. There are human beings that like this kind of persons and don't like this kind of persons. So we all have those inherent biases in our thinking, our daily decision making. Now, if you're building anything, you're likely to transfer your ideologies into that thing you're building. It's like when you have children, your children are likely going to be trained with the same ideologies you have had themselves. So this is where the problem comes. Human beings transfer those biases in most circumstances into the technologies that they get to build. Sometimes by, I've seen the presentation talked about types of biases. I could quickly just mention there. You'd find reporting biases, automation, selection. So some biases would come from the data sets that are used to train the system itself. Some would come from the process of training the system itself. Some would come from the process of relearning, what is being taught. For instance, you'd see there are certain systems that you can train as a user. So when you enter data, it keeps that information and uses that information to retrain the system. So biases could come from these areas, either at the point of building the machine, feeding it with the data, training the data, or retraining the data itself. And now we go over to the issue of, I won't go around the issue of the UDHR and all the historical, I'm sure most of us, especially those of us that are lawyers, we understand that the UDHR is a primary global universal document that deals with fundamental human rights. And it's very important. It's so important that most of our municipal legislations, most of our constitutions scrape a lot of the ideas on human rights from this document. And the key principles are dignity, equality, and non-discrimination. And this is where the issue of discrimination and bias comes in. It's a primary principle of the UDHR that the right against discrimination. And this is something that a very large percentage of municipal constitutions, of local constitutions, or even regional legislations like the ACPHR and other laws have adopted. Of course, the UDHR is globally applicable to individuals, and it doesn't matter the race, the gender, and all that. Right against discrimination in itself is provided for the UDHR, first of all, as an independent right. And secondly, you find it attached to some other rights. And I just talked about these three. First, the first one is Article 2, that talks about the fact that everyone is entitled to all these rights without any distinction, without distinction as per race, gender, and all sorts of distinction. Sometimes we prefer to call it without discrimination of any kind. Then there's also Article 7 that talks about equality before the law, no discrimination. Unfortunately, in most countries, especially in the global south, this is not very much in place. There are some things you wouldn't want to do if you do not have as much money as Davido has, for instance. So some of these rights, notwithstanding, they are there, but whether they're respected or not, it's a different ballgame entirely. Then there's also the right, under Article 26, the right to education. Education itself here does not mean going to school. It's mostly, in most instances, even in the Nigerian constitution, where we do not have education as a fundamental human right, the perspective is that people should be informed. So it's more like education and information. And then we should all accept how much education a person should be able to have access to a certain level of education. In some countries, the right to education is a fundamental human right. There are places where education is even free for this purpose. There are other instances, there are other rights that deal with, talk about discrimination. You see the right to work also to an extent. I wouldn't have the time to go through all that, because when we look at the issues of biases in hiring, I saw that in one of the presentations also. Then you would have to look at the right to work also, and many other places. But then this is a general idea of discrimination that we should have. Now the question is, how can AI, in what areas do we have this discrimination and biases? First, we have algorithmic biases. I mentioned this earlier. Algorithms are like structures that systems are built. So they can, okay, that's not from me, I hope. They can reinforce some certain discriminatory outcomes. Now, this could come from the data or the training itself, right? The algorithm gives feedback. It's like a channel. So when you hear things like garbage in, garbage out, it gives what's in, it gives you the same thing out. So if a human is the one that built and trained the system, then these biases are going to pass through the outcome, whatever outcome these systems are given. We also have the data biases. What kind of data have been used to train the system? You see so many posts, even if you check on LinkedIn or if you try some of these things yourself, if you use some of these language models or even the most popular one now, DALL-E, that provides images, you ask for certain kinds of pictures, it's certainly going to give you you'll see some levels of bias. For instance, 2 weeks ago, I was doing some research, and then I requested for a picture of 10 people sitting on a table doing some, working on legislation on AI. And those 10 people, the picture it generated, those 10 people were men. So it gives an idea that the data that was used to train this system is most likely had come from, a particular set, maybe men, maybe white people, maybe black people, or maybe people from a certain religion. So it only gives out what it's been trained on. The nature of the data determines the outcome. Then, of course, I've talked about human biases. AI systems come with the biases of its creators. It just amplifies what we already have in the society. There's a lot of discrimination in the society. People have specific mentality with regards to people from certain places, or sometimes women, people of certain gender, or people from certain religion or certain areas. And in countries like Nigeria, where we have diverse, Nigeria is so diverse. We have too many people from different aspects, different religions, different cultures. You're going to have these human biases. You go to the market to buy things and you realize that even your language can make things cheaper for you, right? I see this all the time when I'm in Nigeria. Luckily for me, I speak a lot of Nigerian language. So if I go to Enugu, I switch to Igbo. If I go down south, I use that. So it shows you the inherent bias in human beings. Now, these humans build systems in such a way that these systems reflect their inherent biases. And then there are large level biases, like a whole society can have biases against certain people. You'd hear some countries say, oh, this country, they are too racist. Maybe because a very large percentage of the country, of people in that country have this perspective. So these also reflect in the AI, the systems that are built either from the societies. I know Professor Lapenta mentioned this. The way the technology is built, it carries the sociocultural norm of that society, and most times would come with some biases that are also available in the context of the society where it was made. There are just a few examples here. There are so many of them now. I saw some examples, and I really just look forward to the presentation. There are biases that come with facial recognition. You must have read about Google 2015, I think, where it identified 2 Black people as monkeys, right? And this is just recently. I think there are also many other instances of misidentification. Even in the US, there's one at 2021. As recent as these technologies are still being used. So it misidentifies people, people of color due to gender or due to other things, for instance. Now, facial recognition can become a very huge problem because you're passing through airports, you're going to have these technologies everywhere. And if there are biases, of course, like we already have them in these systems, then it's going to lead to a wider circle of problems, of bias-related problems. There's also the use case in loan approval. This is very common in the Western world, in the global north, where we use technologies to look at the credit scores of people, and sometimes could bring unfair loan rejections, or it has some, because that's how those systems are trained. Even human beings do this. If you walk into certain places and you wear your bathroom slippers and you want to take it, let's say for a bank in Nigeria, let me even use Nigeria. You wear bathroom slippers and you want to take a loan of 20 million. the first thing they will do is they'll just look at your feet, look at the clothes you're wearing, and the person begins to think, nah, there's no way he can pay this money. And most times they are wrong. I know, and I mean, I had a personal experience on this issue, not on loan. I used to work in a law firm, a very big law firm then in Nigeria, and the firm was very selective of the clientele that came. Then a woman that used to sell fish, because it was a riverine community in Akwa Ibom, that's where Mobile is. The woman walked into the office and said, my son was just arrested wrongly, and the police said, you should bring money, but I want to get a lawyer. And usually that the range of services she was asking for was something that would hit in that firm, you would pay almost 2 million naira. And I was the first lawyer the person met. So I said, okay, I need to call my boss because I understood her situation. But I mentally just felt there's no way she can pay for this service and she doesn't know. So I called my boss. My boss said I should tell her that I should, send her to another law firm. So, but before I did that, I thought of how I was going to just tell her, go to another law firm. And I said, okay, let me define something. So I told the woman, well, you have to go to the front desk and you advance 2.5 million and then we'll start talking about your case. And the woman said, okay, and went outside, opened the checkbook. She used to sell fish. If you're Nigerian, you know how this works. And then she just stood there, just opened the wrapper, pulled out her checkbook and was asking, whose name should I write in the checkbook? And then the secretary called me and said, come. I came out and, shockingly, even when my boss came and saw the woman, I said, the woman has paid 2.5 million. He said, no, it's not possible. We need to get the money first. So this kind of biases are everywhere. People just look at you and they have these natural biases and they use this, build this into systems. You see in loan approval apps, for instance, they look at your credit score. Oh, last year he borrowed this amount of money. Yes, he has paid back, but he doesn't have a source of income. He doesn't have this, he doesn't have that. And these are built into systems. So it further just pushes that bias. And most times it excuses people because when there is bias and there's a human being behind the table, you can tell the person, no, what you have done is wrong. But when there is no human being, you cannot tell the system you are wrong. So AI is somehow used to shield our own individual biases. There's also, of course, another issue with automated hiring, which is becoming very common these days because most companies use these technologies to hire. We have seen in one of the presentations, somebody mentioned the Amazon hiring algorithm. I think that was, I can't remember the year, whether it was 2015 or so. Now, this system had been trained with CVs of men. So it was more like the kind of data that the system got was just about men. So as long as you're a woman, then you don't even fit into it. It's not been trained by that kind of data. So it does not recognize people of certain gender not because it is biased, but because it has not been trained with that data. So this brings in the bias, the bias from the training process, the data that was collected. Many times it excludes certain groups, sometimes due to unavailability. Those groups are not available at the time of training, or they're available, but you just don't think it's necessary to train the system with data from those kind of people too. And this is not just in technology. It happens in so many other areas. You see when they are making drugs or vaccines, they use people from certain areas to check the vaccines. And after that, we make it available to the whole world. And then it also affects people that were not even part of the training process. So this is also what we have in automated hiring. Those softwares are used in such, they are trained, most of them are trained with some specific kind of data and is used to reduce, it certainly perpetuates some kind of bias when it comes to the hiring process and employment. Also in promotion circumstances. I carried out a research in 2021 and I realized that in a certain area, looked at about 20-25 companies in a certain area, and I realized that women specifically would almost never get to a certain level of, promoted to a certain level because it slowed down. They use these technologies to select who is due for promotion, who could be promoted and to what level. But then when when it's a woman, it slows down. If a man is hired for doing the same thing for 3 years, promoted for doing the same thing for 3 years, a woman is promoted for doing that same thing for 6 years. So a man grows 2 times as fast, and men quickly get to a certain level in the company, managerial levels. Before women get there, they are either too old or they are tired, and then they leave. So it does not outrightly tell the woman, no, you have to leave or you cannot be a manager. But it just makes you realize that if you're here, it's going to take you a longer time, and most women leave in the process. So this also happens, not just hiring, but also in promotion. And many companies are already have been using this for quite a while. So how does this impact discrimination? How does this impact the rights against discrimination under the UDHR? And not just under the UDHR, but in many other legislations where we have the right against discrimination. We've talked about how it undermines equality. If 2 people have the same certificates and they go for the same kind of job, one person is kicked out, not based on the person's ability, but based on what the technology has done. So it undermines equality. You're not the same, you're not placed at the same equal pedestal with another person. It also reduces access. In the other presentation I made, it talked about participation in the political process also. Certain voting systems are built in such a way that it can kick out specific groups of people from the voting process. So you cannot participate in democracy, and this is a very huge problem. So reduced access, it could reduce access to education, it could reduce access to participate in any aspect of the society. It could reduce access to so many things. There's a mall. Let me use some example that is very well known here. There's one of the biggest malls here in Berlin. When the corona virus started, and they said nobody can get into the mall without a face mask. Now there was a camera that could detect whether you have a mask on your face. And there were several times I wanted to use that mall. I would walk to the door with a mask, and then it wouldn't let me in because it was not trained. I talked about the issue of the kind of data it's been trained with. A very large population of persons that go in there are white people with long hair and all that. So as long as it cannot identify your face properly, then it keeps you out. And I had no idea that this is what happened. I kept thinking that there's something wrong with the system. It kept me out of that mall for almost 6 months, until one day I had to ask questions, and then they realized that the training data was faulty. So it can reduce access, not just to sociocultural environments, but to physical places. If there are technologies, if you go to the airport and there is some form of discriminatory treatment from an AI system against you, you might miss your flight. You might, it just cuts off your access to certain places or certain services. And finally, how do we mitigate this? How do we prevent this if we can? I personally do not think it's possible to fully prevent it, but we can reduce it, we can mitigate it. And these are just a few examples. One, we can look at how we collect data. What kind of data do we collect? We talked about at the first instance, the problem could come with the data. Whose data are you using? What kind of data are you using? How diverse is the data you're using? So here I've said you collect diverse and representative data to train the system. So if you want to train a system that is going to be global, then ensure that you get at least a good sample from the major areas where the technology is going to be used. Also, algorithmic transparency. Transparency is a huge thing now in AI ethics. During or before deployment, you need to look at the algorithm. Some people do ethical audits on systems. So you check the algorithm, you run it through certain audit systems to check, is it possible? There are times the data is good, but because the algorithm is in itself faulty or has some bias, the structure is faulty. It's like putting water into a pipe. If that pipe is bent, the water follows the pipe. It doesn't matter whether if the pipe is dirty and you put clean water, what comes out is going to be dirty water. So many times the water source itself is clean, but the channel that the water is passing to the receiver is dirty. So it still picks the dirt because both of them have to work together. So algorithmic transparency means, let's understand what goes on inside the system. And these are ways to check to ensure that these biases are not inbuilt in the structure of the system itself. Finally, we could also have diverse and inclusive teams. If you have, for instance, men and women in a team, when you're training the system, you're likely going to have women requesting, let's have data for women. If you have Black and white people or people from, you can't have everyone, but at least you can have a wide representation. Then it's going to reduce the inherent biases that come from you. You need to have large teams work on single projects. If you have one person, like I used to say, that's the problem with the Nigerian judicial system. We have one person sitting as a judge in most instances. So that one person's bias affects everybody. In the US, you have a jury system. So this is how to check some of those biases. You put more people, make the process of the development process more inclusive and have more diverse members of the team. I look forward to hearing, listening to the presentation and taking questions in other areas. I just really wanted us to look at this issue of discrimination and how AI systems could enhance it to make it worse. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and then I'll take questions when they are ready. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Gabriel. Thank you for that session on the discrimination aspects to AI bias. So we'll be going further. Okay, before that, let's see reactions from our mentees. Saying thank you to Mr. Gabriel. That was a very lovely, detailed, informative presentation on the discrimination aspects of AI bias. So as we do that, let's group one, the presenter for the group, come up and make their presentation. Please, the time for the presentation is 10 minutes. We would like you to stick to time so that we can have enough time to ask questions and also give answers to questions within the stipulated time for this section. So presenter for AI, please, if you're ready, you can come up and make your presentation. Group presenter for AI. If the presenter is unavailable, can the backup or can someone from within the group help us with the presentation, the group presentation? Okay, thank you, Abasi.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Your device is echoing. Please, can you mute maybe your second device?
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Mentors. Yes.
Hi.
So for this week, we are presenting, we talk about AI bias and its human rights implications. And then we have our table of content. We'll be talking about what AI bias is and the examples, types of AI bias in human sectors. We talk about the health sector and education. Talk about the implications of biased AI, how AI bias affects the society, and then how AI bias can be prevented. So we're going into the main work. AI bias, first of all, we try to define or explain the meaning of bias itself. And this means the bias itself means a systematic error in the output of a result in which one output is influenced or encouraged more than the other. And so by the time we marry it with artificial intelligence, it will mean the systematic error in the output in which the system influences one output over the other output. This is due to the training of data, how the data was trained, the prejudiced training of the machine learning process. And then we can see that we have examples of this. We have the examples of this biased AI. We saw back in 2010, mid-2010, where the Amazon algorithm discriminated against women and favored just the men's CV because the AI, technology industry favors is mostly dominated by the men. So at the time, the data that was used to train the system was most of the CV from the men. So that influenced the decision of the system, thereby penalizing the CV of women, most of the women that were qualified for the role they applied for. And we have the compass race bias with offending rates. We have the US healthcare algorithm, which favors mostly the whites, because the data they used to train the system was mostly that of the white people. As you know that most of the engines and the algorithm that was developed, or even up till now, is mostly in the West. So they mostly want to use the data and the facts they have ready and available over there to train this system, not focusing on let's say how do I put it? Not focusing on everybody, where getting data from outsourcing data everywhere possible. They just focus on certain groups and certain individuals. This will influence the decision and output of the system. Then also talk about the types of AI bias. And from our work, from research, we have a lot of types of AI bias, but for our work, we reduced it just to these 4: reporting bias, selection bias, group attribution bias, implicit bias, where selection bias occurs if the training data is where the training data represents only overrepresents a section of people and underrepresents the other. This can be seen where, okay, I've already said that for instance, where the AI, take for instance, since this machine, most of the engines and the AI and their algorithm were developed in the West. When searching for, this will in turn influence the results they give. Take for instance, when you're searching for a bride and a groom, picture of a bride and a groom, they'll most likely promote or display that's a picture of a bride and groom from the Western part of the world compared to, and promote that of the African groom or bride. That's an example of selection bias. We have the implicit bias, we have the group attribution bias. Implicit bias is when it occurs in our thinking, that the the way we assume things, our personal experiences, not necessarily applying, checking if we're thinking or the way we think, if there are other options to it. So we just portray, just push forward our own experiences, how we felt or experienced.
Oh, sorry about that. I think she developed a little network glitch. Is there a backup? Is the backup presenter available so that he can just continue from where she stopped, or while we wait for her to join? Please, is there a backup or anyone that was able to also go through it that can represent her as we wait for her to come back? Group, are you guys with me? Can you hear me? Okay, Imabasi, are you with us? Are you with us?
Sorry for that disruption. My network kicks me out. So, where was I? The AI bias in human sector. Most of the artificial intelligence machines tend to, it's still the same thing we are saying, but being that these people, like the developers, the designers of the system, are mostly from the Western part. They have limited data. They focus on the data and resources they get from that part of the world, country, without extending down here. And sometimes, because of the limited data they've fed to the system, it might not accurately give results like it should. Like, for instance, when building an AI system and you want to let this AI system know what a cat looks like, you're going to feed this AI system with thousands of cats, thereby making this AI system able to know what a cat looks like, even more than how a human would identify easily. So using the data of, just like, for instance, you want this AI system to know what cancer looks like, and then you are using that of a white person without going across, using the blacks and all races. This system will, in turn, the output will just, if it's not a white person, when scanning for cancer from a black person, might not be able to spot it because of the data that was fed to the system initially. So this can affect the health system, and sometimes also when, in identifying symptoms of illnesses or diseases, and also prescribing medication for a particular ailment, being that the system is not able to spot the problem, the system might in turn not be able to recommend or might not be able to recommend a good drug in turn. So that is a problem in the health sector. Then we move to the education, health. Okay, example. We have the example here, the gender disparity. In the health sector, we know that sickness in the body of a man and a woman might have different effects. And so using that when building an AI system, using that of a man only when feeding in particular data from a man to the machine without balancing it with that of a woman, the machine might use just that of a man might use the data of a man. I don't know if you understand, but using that of a man to diagnose and also recommend drugs for a woman. Meanwhile, it's not supposed to be the same. The body of a man and a woman is different. So when designing, developing a system, AI system, data should be from both sides. If not, it might have color disparity in diagnosing skin cancer. I said that socioeconomic bias and bias in linguistic, whereby when developing an AI system, the voice and language of a person from a certain place, the system might get used to that, and then taking that and bringing in another person from a different place entirely that speaks differently, different intonation, and the system noticing this might not be able to give the required solution, being that it does not match the language, and the intonation does not match the initial data it was fed with. Then move on to AI bias in education. AI bias in education, the education system, whereby we see that the system knows in education, AI has impacted the educational system in several ways. It is crucial to acknowledge and analyze the biases that can emerge within AI system as they become potential. Now, in the educational system, the problem here, how AI can be biased, is that when creating a system or developing a system, a student that, for instance, a student that initially maybe had poor results, was not performing good in school, and then you're taking that information, that data, to feed a particular machine, and then, for instance, this student steps up, the data, the AI machine will eventually depend on that, might be biased in the output, being that that's what I think, that's what we call historical data. So the system will rely on the history of that student to give the outputs, and this might not be nice. So, and also allowing machines to give outputs, to give decisions on a particular student might not really be nice when we have a teacher that knows a student so well. And I feel like AI machines in education should be made in a way that they can give teachers the access to correct certain decision making of the machines. If not, the system might be biased with certain things like the performance of the students from past performances and outputs, like the students' behavior in school generally. Then we have, the examples might be grading assessments, the grading and assessment bias, stereotyping and discrimination, reinforcing achievement gaps. And then we move on to the implications of biased AI. This refers to the presence of unfair and unjust discriminations in the outcomes produced by artificial intelligence system. This has influenced the biased AI has influenced human rights, the implications of human rights issues. It has influenced in several ways. We have the privacy rights, we have discrimination, we have freedom of expression, whereby AI is restricts certain, let's take for instance, social media, where you're expressing yourself. Nowadays, we have different ways to express. As I've said, it might not just be physically, like you can put up a content on social media, and then we have AI limiting or reduce, the algorithm restricts such posts or content, and then promote another, like that will be seen as not allowing the expression, restricting the freedom of expression of certain people. And my discrimination in, the algorithm might discriminate certain people, the blacks from the whites. And we have, for instance, privacy rights. We have the access of information, healthcare and education, how AI affects the system. This is so many ways: gender, race, economic status, and then also in loan collections. Our mentor already said it, whereby you want to get a loan and checking your history, your social status. This restricts. Sorry. Sorry about that, please. That was not from me. I was talking about how AI bias affects society.
No, don't say it that way.
Hiring also affects in the hiring process. We've made reference to the Amazon algorithm back in 2010, mid-2010, where it discriminated women and then hired males because of the data it had, and then criminal justice system, where you might promote injustice. If someone, an ex-convict, like for instance, might be seen as someone that, a future threat might be seen as someone that would likely cause harm to the society, might likely commit a crime again. There are chances that that person will change, but this AI system might, I think that's social scoring, where, I don't know where I'm going, but social scoring is also there. Credit scoring in financial services. I've talked about the criminal justice system, where AI might be biased and be harsh towards those ex-convicts or those that have been sentenced, those that have been in prison before. Then also, we talk about how this can be prevented. But this AI bias can be prevented in so many ways. This can be through selecting appropriate data, training data, and also validate the data by making in-depth research. And when providing this data, you cover a whole area. Like, take for instance, like you're making a very, what should I say? Like, when, for instance, when developing an AI, you don't just dwell on the Western people, the white people. You come down to the blacks, you take samples from them, and then you view the training data. You view this training data, take feedbacks also. It's also a way to prevent a biased AI. Take feedbacks and then maintain a quality assurance, understand the training data you used or to be used. I feel this will help prevent bias in AI. Yes, and yeah. Then that's the end. Then in conclusion, we have that though AI has the potential to revolutionize our lives, we must also be cautious of and meticulous of the data we feed to these systems so that to reduce discrimination. We have inequality already in our system, but AI should not also add to it by increasing this inequality gap in our society. So AI should be used properly, like the algorithm. It should promote fairness and also ethical. It should also put the ethical concerns should also be something we should look into and make it a better tool for future use. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Imabasi, for that presentation. Well done. I would like to see reactions from your group members saying, job well done. Thank you for trying your possible best to give as much as you were able to your presentation or your thoughts and the knowledge into the topic of the day. So we'd like to have contributions from our mentors. Professor Francesco Lapenta. Sir, can you give your contribution on the presentation that was made by the group? Sir.
So I'm really impressed by how thorough the overview of the two presentations was. They actually combined really incredibly well with one another. No, I think what I was trying to recommend you when thinking about AI biases is to integrate the general views into a broader context of technological bias. The reason why is because power likes to hide. You know, it's very good at kind of camouflaging itself in many ways, no? And also in kind of directing decision making. Let me give you an example. No, the first attempts to develop energy produced by the sun in Africa was in the 70s. There were many attempts to try to promote Africa as the place where solar energy could be implemented, and were that to happen, probably some areas in Africa or some nations in Africa would be leaders in what has become probably one of the most high potential evolution for energy production. And so the bias towards the other forms of investments, they weren't so much cultural, it was simply based on economic interests that had all the interest in being able to control the energy sources, because of course if you were to produce energy with solar energy, the entire infrastructure that is supporting oil, the entire technological machinery and the industrial complex that is creating the cars and based on that specific technology would be devalued. So many times what might be characterized as cultural bias can be basically a very specific strategy. Now, why it can also be characterized by cultural bias is because probably in some regions of the world that are lucky to have sun for a lot longer than other regions of the world, that's an abundant resource. And probably if you were to educate and invest in research and innovation in that field, based on the abundance of that resource, you would have a competing leadership. You would have a country that is leading into an alternative area, no? Now, the problem with bias is that it is always, when discussed in terms of a cultural bias, is always a bit of a double-edged sword, no? Because you provided incredibly good examples of what negative biases really are. This is not always the case. I've been in many presentations where they are leaning, for example, when they're talking about disinformation or misinformation, or when they're talking about representation in specific training models. It's also important to understand that sometimes it's very difficult to define when a bias is a bias and is not a cultural specificity. Because if you think of a system that is absolutely neutral, that system would also imply the total obliteration of cultural differences. And as it was very clearly described by, sorry, the first presentation I've, I don't, who was the first? Dennis, who's
Okay, so
the first presentation?
That was from also our co-mentor, Mr. Gabriel Udo. Yes, sir.
Gabriel gave a very, very good example of cultural dimensions. No? So I know that we have a little time. So there's two things I want to conclude. One is that I think it's you've been incredibly good at selecting what I feel are the right cases of bias that should be tackled, because those are the ones that have specific social consequences. But what I encourage you to do is to more and more include more dimensions of bias in technological designs, because what I notice more and more is that while the focus is shifting towards algorithmic bias, other forms of technological bias are less discussed. And innovation processes, for example, is a fundamental one for me. The fact that competing technologies or competing models that have a very strong cultural bias because of the resources or culture of local community should also start to be designed and defined and critiqued as form of cultural bias by the financial system, by the entire industrial complex and innovation systems. But so thank you very much for what I thought it was a brilliant presentation to both of you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that wonderful observation. Mr. Gabriel, rather, in absentia, had to take his leave. He said he had an emergency to deal with. So we'll just be going straight to the question and answer session. Since Mr. Gabriel is in absentia, I'm sure Prof will be able to help tackle some of the questions we might be having as regards the topic that we dealt with today. So we would like to take live questions first and foremost. If there are live questions from our mentees, those that maybe say over the course of the research, maybe a question or two popped up that you don't have so much clarity on and you want to gain proper understanding into what you were researching on the topic of the day, please, you can go ahead and ask your live questions. If you aren't able to do that, you can also send in your question in the chat box. So please, we'll be engaging on both fronts, we'll be taking both live questions and we'll be reading questions from the chat box. So if you have a question, this is your opportunity. You can raise your hand, you can send your message into the chat box, and we'll be taking. So Francesco Lapenza can. Are there questions? Are there questions from anyone? Okay. While we still wait for live questions from our mentees, we'll be taking some of the questions, the 2 questions they asked from the research that they made. The first question is, are there legal measures or policies that companies are meant to adopt to ensure that AI bias do not occur in their line of work? So that's the first question that they asked, and I would like you to probably, sir, in the best of your ability, address it, sir.
Yeah, so this is a very complicated topic, because you have to go to the bottom of how you can address biases in training algorithms. So first of all, there's a problem of transparency of the data that are used. So companies are not willing to share the data sets that they are using to train the AI systems. So that is very many times the case, no? So the only way you can really, at this stage, right now, because there isn't a global regulation, and it's not very likely to happen, because the geopolitics today are basically, they're deteriorating to an incredible point, and this is really dangerous, because not only the geopolitical situation is becoming very threatening, but there's also an entrenching of innovation that is becoming more and more not willing to be controlled as it was perhaps 2 years ago, no? So the tools to control bias are necessarily legal. They move via technological solutions where in some ways there needs to be formulas to be able to control the data sets that are used and the outcome, both in terms of the data that are used, but also the way in which the system is using the data and how it's trained to use them. So what outcomes in practice these systems might have in specific scenarios. So this requires testing of a community of specific AI systems in specific scenarios to see what the outcomes are and to identify possible biases so that they can be fixed. And to do that in a realistic way, you need a global entity where users can kind of submit cases of perceived bias. So there should be a kind of a global database where use cases are reported and they can be analyzed by specific entities. They can be national or international. But as it is right now, there's no willingness to adhere or to create global legislation. Many of the negotiations that have been developing in the past 4 years have been really idle now, including the European American TTC negotiations. I mean, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of talk about creating a global system. Probably the only one I would look at right now is the one led by the United Nations. It's probably the only entity right now that could create an international body to which then report pragmatically cases of bias. But to be quite honest, I don't think realistically there is right now a way to hold those companies accountable, because there's no legislation that imposes the ability to look into their systems, their data training and whatnot. Europe is moving some steps in that direction, So that is one strong possibility. Now, as you mentioned, the AI Act. I mean, if the AI Act gets a resonance and is adopted by other nations and other countries, the momentum might increase globally for creating a real opportunity to control and to make companies accountable, basically, no? So they need to be responsible of negative outcomes that have an impact based on cultural bias or profiling or whatnot. But it's a very, very complex machine, and I think Europe is more and more isolated in this, because before there was more talks and more possibilities of negotiation, even with China. But right now you will see that countries are entrenching themselves, and they don't want to limit innovations based on specific regulations. So I always have an overview of, let's say, the complexity, but also the possibility of a system to evolve towards accountability. But right now we are in deep red, in my view. We went from orange to red. We went to from a building momentum for global regulation to a moment in which the main actors' main interest is to compete. I mean, the amount of projects I see in AI in the military that don't abide to the same regulation, I mean, it's insane very recently. So it's a, yeah, I don't have a very positive outlook for the immediate future because of the geopolitics and what's going on in the world right now. No, I think that the global South, this is something I kept telling you, and I recommend all of the people in this room bring legal cases to all organizations around the world. I mean, you have the skills. I mean, you're trained to be able to communicate in a legal manner. And if you bring them, even if there is no authority, even if there is already an organization, but if you bring those kind of challenges to specific events, to specific outcomes, to specific companies' known impacts, and then you bring them to challenge in the country, I think that overall this is how progress is always made. It's made with the very qualified people that have the right ideals, that very slowly bring actual cases trying to change outcome and practice. No, and so I recommend anybody in the global South to be very vocal, very loud, protesting and presenting the cases as you did today in as many international contexts as you can, demanding action, because in the long term it's humans that create real social innovation. If you look at history, it's always individuals that initiated big movements that created social change. So never underestimate what you can do individually, because it's just a matter of the right person at the right time willing to make a difference. No, so it's one of the reasons why I'm enthused to work with you and to participate in this program, because I consider you some of the most qualified people to be kind of leaders of change, because you can scream with a specific voice and you have the tools to challenge with the right instruments. Even if there isn't a specific court where you can be heard, you can still provide cases and make them visible to sensitive individuals in dominant geopolitical areas of innovation. And they are heard. I can give you an example. In the United Nations, there's this program created by the Secretary General for the Pact for the Future. And some countries from the global South, they stopped the program. They managed to stop it for a period because they said they wanted to understand how that integrated with the sustainability goals, which they see as a much more pragmatic and already agreed upon set of instruments. And they thought the digital pact for the future was taking attention and competing with the SDGs. So they actually stopped the initiative for a while, so that they renegotiated the mission, they renegotiated the agenda, they integrated better with the SDGs. That was because from few individual people from the global south that knew how to articulate it, and they managed to stop it. So that's my recommendation. Don't dare to bring up cases in the relevant rooms globally.
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. Wonderful answer to that question. You addressed how that currently there's no global position, or rather, if I'll say stand, in terms of legislation to deal and tackle with biases on a general front globally. And I think in that sense, in a kind of way, it also answers the second question, which says, are there any policy or regulation that's applicable in situations where AI bias is detected? Well, I also believe that based on the scenarios that you have raised and the answers you have given, that currently now a lot of companies are not ready to let go of information based on the database they use to train their AI systems in such a way that people to detect the biases. Even when they are detected, there's little or nothing they can do to address those situations. So we look forward to having mentees, right, who are in turn planning to advance themselves on this front, raise up these questions, raise up these fronts on a global, raise up these questions and fronts on a global scale, where we can now have leaders and global structures begin to adhere as AI begins to take over the general global market. So thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful answer. I would like to see if there are still any questions before we call it a wrap to this section. Are there any questions that may still be left unanswered that that you would like, or our mentees would like to ask? Okay, it seems that's all. That's for the question and answer section. So just before we go, we would like to have our brief picture section. So if our mentees are, if it's possible, we'd like to have you guys turn on your videos and your cameras so that we can take pictures before we fully round up this section. Thank you.
I wish I was in this picture. I don't my talking about the Murphy's law, my camera is totally dead for some reason. It's 2 days. I have no idea why. You have
yes, I remember you made mention of that. Thank you so much, sir, for the
you will have to edit me in the picture. So I'll send you a picture and you put me in there, because I want to be in this picture.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much for that. We'll try our best to make sure of that. So thank you. We're done with the picture section. Thank you everyone for joining in for today's section. Thank you, Prof, for your time. You spent 2 hours of your time to come and in the best of your ability, like, even though, you know, it's something that we may not be able to totally give in 2 hours, full detailed explanations into bias in AI and the human rights regulation. You were still able in that small time alongside Mr. Gabriel to help us, like, give us an insight into what we need to know and what we generally we need to know pushing forward and moving forward. So thank you again, sir, for your your time. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for everything you do for us. We sure like to also have you in the future. Come again and again to help us train more mentees and to help us move this agenda forward. So thank you once again, and thank you
my
to our
privilege, my pleasure, and quite honestly, I'm hoping to soon come and visit. So because I mean, this is a wonderful tool, but now I feel I need to bring it to the next stage. But we'll discuss this. But this is a pleasure and an honor for me to contribute and to work with you. Huh?
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for that. We'll be sure glad to have you come over, sir. And I'm sure we'll do well to give you a befitting hosting period while you come over to this part of the world. So thank you to our mentees once again. I wish you all a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day. This is the end of class. Look forward to see you.
And see you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.